We have now launched the online Shockwave course. When I set the company up, which is over 12 years ago now, which is hard to believe, I was always about educating the clinicians as well, not just in terms of the technology. So when Dom Smith came to me with this idea of doing the Shockwave course, I was all for it. And Dom and Katie have done a fantastic job of putting it together. It's really impressive, really comprehensive. It is technology agnostic, so whatever system you're using will be able to help you with this. So it's a brilliant piece of work. The guys have done really well. So check it out and go to the link below and let us know what you think.
Hello and welcome. Today I am joined by Ali Rose, who's a physiotherapist, which does seem like an underplaying of her experience and abilities. But I'm looking forward to hearing more about you, Ali. And yeah, thank you for joining.
Hi, Andy. Thank you very much for inviting me.
No problem. So, Ali, your name crops up whenever an Olympic cycle seems to come around. Your name can be thrown out, but I'm looking forward to hearing more about your background. So, where are you from originally?
Bit of a long story, but the three of us in our family were all born in Canada, but came back to the UK when I was 12, and I studied my physio course in Edinburgh, and then I spent a couple of years in Australia and a year in Ireland, and then ended up in Leeds.
Right.
By accident.
Well, we'll get round to that then. So, how come you ended up in Canada and whereabouts in Canada?
Dad's New Zealander, mum's English, and just for Dad's just wanted to get a different type of job because he couldn't get he's a journalist. So they went to Canada just to in search of jobs and things, and which is why we all ended up out there, and then came back to the UK, like I said, when I was 12. So that brought us all back.
And so like before you decided to do physio then, like what prompted that move?
Originally, I knew I wanted to do something in the medical side of things. I'd worked in either nursing auxiliary roles as a sort of 18-year-old upwards. Mum used to work in a hospice, so I knew it was something along those lines. Thought I wanted to be a doctor, didn't get the grades to get into that. And then I started to do anatomy and physiology, thinking I would swap into medicine. And at that point, I thought, you know what, actually, I love exercise physiology. I love biomechanics and the biomechanics of injury. Absolutely love physiology and anatomy and the way that all fits together. And for some reason, I just had this eureka moment of, actually, why don't you be a physio? And I'd never been to a physio. I ran competitively at the time, but I was lucky, never had any injuries. So I'd never actually even been to a physio. So I didn't really have the awareness of what that was. But I think this for me is it's the perfect career choice because I still enjoy it now, and I really enjoy working out that fit of why someone's got injured and how all those pieces fit together.
Yeah. So what was your race then?
The marathon, 10K and marathon. Unfortunately, I wasn't fast enough to do anything slower or quicker rather. So
but you're not had any injuries at that point then. So how old were you when you thought actually, yeah, physio would be something good to have not had to have seen a physio? That sounds quite good, especially if you're doing the marathon.
At that point, I wasn't doing the marathon. I was doing sort of like, I absolutely loved cross country and 3K on the track, 5K on the track. So I was doing those kind of races and training a reasonable amount. I think I was just lucky. And then when I started my physio course, I was then moving up through the distances. And my coach was in Edinburgh, so he was looking after that. And that was when we decided to move up towards the marathon. But I think being a physio student, you could actually pick up on, if you were starting to get a bit of a niggle, how to fix it, or you could reflect as to why you might have that niggle. I was still really, really lucky, but I think it gave me that awareness of if you can nip any kind of niggles in the bud, then actually it keeps your consistency of training going, and that's great for performance. So I've still carried that through now.
So how come you ended up choosing Edinburgh?
My first degree in anatomy and physiology was in Dundee, and if I'm honest, they were the only place that took me or offered me a place. So I went there. I love Edinburgh, so it was the perfect choice for me. I met the guy that ended up coaching me to the marathon. He was in Edinburgh as well, so it was perfect.
So you did a full degree in Dundee and then went there. So it was that 6 consecutive years.
Yes. at which point I
Right.
was ready to start working.
I was going to say, yeah, that's quite probably the student debt wasn't quite as big then as it would be now. It definitely wasn't that bad for me. But like, how did that feel when you were doing like a continuous 6 years?
I absolutely loved my time in Dundee. So I think at that point I thought, well, actually, let's just kind of carry on and do this. I think if I'd stopped at that point, maybe I wouldn't have gone back into it. Yeah, I was just ready to finish by the end of it. And actually, I much preferred our placements. Absolutely loved the placements to actually when we were actually in college or in uni doing the studying. And I think that's how I really learn, is working with others and seeing how things work in action and practicing.
And where were the placements?
All over the place in West Lothian. So some were in Edinburgh, one was in Kirkcaldy, one was in Stirling. So you got sent various places and just had to get to them. And we were really lucky at the time because all of those placements were really hands-on. So you accrued a vast amount of experience. And I worked with some fantastic supervisors. So, it opened my eyes up to a lot of different ways of treating and things that you just don't learn in uni, because it is when you get out of uni that you start really, really learning.
Yeah, how helpful do you think it was that you'd done the first course, like not just from the scientific side of anatomy and physiology, but also just from maturity side?
I think that was really helpful. There were 10 of us that were mature students, although I was I literally was 21 or 22. And there was quite a big difference between the new students that were just 18 and those of us that, even with just being a student for those extra 3 years. And I think all the nursing auxiliary work really helped with that, because I'm sure some of the reasons I passed my placements was because I knew ways of getting the best out of people, and that communication skill that you don't have when you're 18. And you need to spend a lot of time with people to be able to work out different personalities and how to, just find a way to get them to agree to do your exercises or buy into the treatment plan that you've set for them.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. I was back at my old uni MMU this week, and I was in the sports science labs, which I think are absolutely incredible. You sometimes wonder, certainly from a sports science side, which I guess was relatively similar to your first one, is that practicality wise, how do you use it? Like what career do you go into for those things, and what does it actually give you from a I suppose a human interaction perspective? Whereas I guess physio it's client facing all the time. You're constantly working with people. So how well prepared do you think that from both degrees, if you'd just done one of them, that you would be to actually start working and interacting?
I think the trouble with anatomy and physiology is there isn't really a job pathway from that. There are obviously physiology jobs, but there weren't as many of them then. And I knew I didn't want to go into an anatomy lab and do that side of things. The physio course, I think one of the really good things about it was, what we were taught at uni was great. And then you went and you had 6 weeks of practicing what you had been taught with people that were doing it all day, every day. See, that degree of learning. So by the time I left, I chose not to do the final. They were adding on a 4th year at that point. And I definitely had enough, but the final year was going to be more research. And so I thought, no, I have had enough now, and came out at the end of my 3rd year. But I felt really quite confident in terms of being able to go and start working, as long as I was, able to ask people. And I think that's really important when you qualify, is having someone that you can go and ask questions. And I think even now, this many years later, you still see things that you've never seen before, or you might have seen one case of, or again, you end up having to pick up the phone to a doctor colleague to say, actually, these are the signs and symptoms, and actually I don't really know where to go with this. And we're learning all the time, and humans are always different, aren't they? And every case is different. And
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really good message for people. And like, how do you see that with people coming through? Like, have you always been aware enough to think, actually, I need to ask for this, or have you been through a phase where you're more actually, yeah, I know what I'm doing, I'm cracking on, and not being open to actually ask?
no, I think I've always been able to ask, because my first boss had a rule of 3 treatment rule, which is what I've got in our clinic. And it was absolutely fantastic because she said, if you can't see results, things changing within 3 treatments, then you either need to completely reassess, ask someone else for help, or refer them into one of the doctors that worked at the clinic. So it's given me that thing. And I really believe if you get to the bottom of why the person's got the problem in the first place, then if you start to address those reasons, then you should be starting to see results within 3 treatments. So I've always had, literally from the word go, that question in my head of, am I doing the right thing, and do I need to ask somebody else for help? And I'm so lucky now, having done all the team trips that I've done, and I've got great colleagues, and I can ring people if I know it's a really complicated foot issue or back issue or a real complex medical issue. I've got lots of people I can ring and ask that are always happy to answer questions, or they seem to be anyway. Maybe they're not, but
yeah, they're giving you the answers, so that's good. So that, in terms of that, then, like, what were your aspirations when you once started the physio? What was your vision for it?
I never dreamt of running a clinic. That was never on my radar, and I think that kind of grew organically around me as things got busy. There weren't very many jobs in sport at all. Neil Black had literally the only paid job in athletics, and he was never going to get out of that job because he was great at it. So I think that was one of those jobs where you thought, oh God, I'd love to work in athletics as a physio, but the chance of getting that, and there were a few trips available, but you literally were having to do 3 things down at the rugby club. And I did a lot of unpaid work just to get experience within sport, because I like the sports environment. I like the outpatient environment where it's, you're having to really assess something, work out how to get it better, and hopefully get those, quick fixes, and then, move on. So yeah, that was going to be my ideal job. But at that point, because there were so few jobs, the likelihood of getting in there, you just have to kind of be hoping that at some point a door would open and you'd be there.
So what were you thinking it was going to be then?
That was I think the kind of, and I absolutely loved the job I had in Edinburgh. It was at a sports injury clinic at Edinburgh Uni, called PHASIC. And then when I left there and went to work in Australia for a couple of years, I worked as a civilian for an army, or for the army barracks, of one of those. And I really, really enjoyed that job, because it was like working with sports people, because they had to be really physical for their job, and a lot of them needed a lot of management because of the fact they were carrying heavy packs. And I learned so much working there, because they absolutely committed to treatment. They had to be better for their jobs. If you asked them to do something every single day, 3 times a day, they would do it, because that was in their nature. They could get downgraded if they weren't doing their exercises. So there was a real drive, a bit like the athletes, there was a real drive to get themselves better. And because I was working for the army, I could see them 5 days a week if I needed to. So there were lots of times you could try different exercises or different treatments. And, so I learned so much from working there, of things that worked and things that didn't work. And, again, all those lessons that when I came back here, kept on implementing them.
Yeah. So what made you move back?
Just a change of job, and a few other things. And I'd gone to, while I was there, I went to the Sydney Olympics, only in the holding camp. But Neil, that I mentioned earlier, had fallen off a horse and broke his leg in about 5 places 10 days before he was due to travel out there. And I got this phone call out of the blue from Neil saying, well, this accident's happened, and would I fancy going to the holding camp for the Sydney Olympics, which I've been hoping to compete at, but got an injury at that point. So that, for me, really opened that door. And I met some of the other colleagues I've mentioned, and then ended up, because of that, came back to the UK via Edmonton, the world champs in Edmonton.
So yeah, you really were, I think you were underplaying your athletic prowess then. So you were actually on the verge of going to Sydney.
It would have been a big ask. I'd been to the world champs and World Cup and European champs before that. So it was one of those, well, might as well give it a try. And unfortunately got injured. If you don't try, you don't get. And I I think I was always going to be a better physio than I was runner. But for me, it was really good to have the two things together, because if I was ever, if you had an injury, you couldn't train, then you actually realise that you've got another string to your bow, and there are people worse off than you are. So for me, it really worked having the two strands of things going on at the same time.
Do you enjoy running?
Love it.
Do you actually literally? I struggle when people say they love running, because I run it and I hate it. And I'm doing like park runs or whatever. I hate it the entire time. However, I do like the mental winning about completing whatever you're doing. But do you actually literally enjoy it whilst you're running?
Yeah, I do. Unless probably, I guess as you get older, those days are fewer between, because you sometimes think, oh, my back hurts today. But no, I've always really enjoyed it, and it's been a time where I just switch off. And I didn't really particularly like track sessions, because they were obviously really hard, really focused, and they were probably the worst day of the week. But those days when you go out and you just switch off when you're running, and you're just in the moment, and no, I really enjoy it. And it is where good thinking happens. And
Yeah. Do you run with music, or did you run with like listening to stuff like when you were doing it?
no,
Or
tried it a couple of times, and I thought, no, actually, I just like running. And I think
yeah,
sometimes, some people, when I was really fit and doing the marathon running, I think you're just really efficient, and your body is just used to, running nicely. And so the days when I know I'm not running quite as well, those I like those days a lot less.
yeah. No, I mean, I guess it's not. It is something to admire, but also just it's just like, yeah, that because I despise it so much, even though I'd still do it, and I feel good having done it. I love having finished a race or a run. But yeah, the actual act of it is so. Yeah, but I'm pleased that you enjoyed it. Obviously, that was why it was helpful. And like so when you'd coming back from, like, what was it like in Australia? Because I remember watching that one, because it was obviously Sydney, so the time difference was a real pain, and I was in Sydney the following year. But like, what was it like being a part of that?
Absolutely brilliant. I was out there with it was kind of one of those really strange experiences, because some of the physios on the team I'd never met. One of those was Mark Buckingham. And so I'd heard of these people. So they again had that sort of hero status of working in the athletics world. It's like, oh my goodness, I'm replacing Neil on this trip, and I'm going to be working with all of these people. And Mark was absolutely lovely, and he rang me up and said, oh, I can't wait to work with you. It's, and meet you. And so, that really set me at ease. And then, of course, you're turning up as the little nobody. And because I was the first one there, I ended up working with, some of those top athletes in that team. It was an interesting experience in that at that point, you could qualify the year before, but they didn't ask you to show fitness the year of. So you might have been on the team having not done your event for probably 9 months. So we worked unbelievably hard. And sometimes you had to see people twice a day to even get them on the start line. I was only in the village. I didn't go in. Sorry. Yeah, I was only in the holding camp. I didn't end up in the village as well, because I was there with the marathon runners till, right towards the end. So absolutely loved it. It was incredibly hard work. There were too many people that had kind of arrived with various things that we needed to sort out. I met some fantastic people, but as your first trip, it was great, if not exhausting. But
What was it like with that when Kathy Freeman, like, I know you weren't literally in there, but what was that like when that happened? Because that is one of the most iconic Olympic moments.
yeah, I wasn't in the stadium at that point. I think I was still probably up on the Gold Coast.
But could you feel it though, from a country perspective?
Yeah. No, obviously all that pride and people talking about it and everybody watching it, and then you get on that role of, I know, you get a taxi somewhere and they're excited because you're working at with Olympians and they're all watching it. So no, I think any Olympics, and even coming back from Paris this year, people were seeing my bag, and when we were coming back and saying, oh, that was such a great Olympics, and thanks for looking after people. And I saw them, a couple of the athletes were in front of me when we got off at St Pancras, and people were saying, oh, thanks for just doing such a great job and bringing some joy. And So I think that kind of people getting behind those great big sporting events is really magical.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with you. And I think for that period, I think particularly London, I think was just like one of the most magical 3 weeks. Just from watching it, you couldn't believe how good it was. Like it was just everything seemed absolutely perfect on it. But I guess you must be even more so heightened for you in the thick of it.
Yeah, it's a kind of weird one. I think people assume it's going to be really glamorous. And again, until you go and see how things pan out, because you could go and everyone could get a niggle, in which case your workload is massively increased. So I've been to some games where it's not been great in terms of acute injuries and things, and you're having to try and make sure that you can actually either fix people well enough to get them through their next round. You can have a lot of travel. There are times when you don't see, because you're not in the stadiums, you're in the warm-up track behind, or else you're at the village. So you may not see much of what's going on. You might not, you might be working with athletes, but don't even see their race or their event. So, you're not going and just sitting there watching. There's a lot going on behind the scenes, and just the atmosphere is great. And yeah, this Paris Olympics was great because, again, we didn't have too many issues. The Parisians did a fantastic job. When you did get a chance to go into the stadium, the atmosphere in the stadium and the stadium itself was just brilliant. So you could feel that as well, but it can change depending on a whole load of parameters.
Yeah. Well, the opening ceremony was a bit weird. Well,
we weren't at that. We were at our very, very lovely BOA holding camp, which was, it was great. That was also fantastic. So that holding camp, they'd done a really great job with that, and so we were there at the time.
Yeah, no, I really think it is amazing that period, and I think sometimes like when you compare it, so we have the Euros on, say in the summer as well, and I think that there seems to be just a sort of an uplifting feeling, whereas with football sometimes there can be a bit of a contrasting vibe to it. Maybe because I feel a bit sorry for the England guys because we know a lot of the medical team there as well, and they're saying how positive it is, and then the nation so sort of seems negative, even though they get to the final. And then the Olympics, I feel like it just is everyone is behind it rather than looking at the negatives.
Yeah, I don't know what it is, because to compete at that level so high, it doesn't matter what your sport is. Everybody would love to be able to do that, but to actually get to that top level, whether it is being in the England team, whether it's being at the Olympics, everything needs to go right for you. It's not just a given that you'll get there, and then all of the steps to get to a final, that all needs to go in your favor as well. So it's not easy, and I think it's easy to sit at home and pick holes in whatever's happening by the people that you see on the television.
Yeah, I think maybe it's. I mean, I'm always kind of thinking about that side, but maybe it's because they're such big stars on the football side, whereas the Olympic people, they're known, but maybe not always seen in the press every day and aren't getting paid millions. But anyway, that's a different topic. We won't get
Possibly.
into all
I
that.
think a lot of them come across as being very human as well, don't they? And I think all those human stories that are nice to know, and then you slightly get to know the person, and then you see them out there working really hard to hopefully do their best and get a great result.
Yeah, no, I think you think you're probably right. Yeah, a bit more relatable, which isn't even the footballer's fault, is it? But anyway, yeah, we'll get off that one. So for you then, so when was your first experience of going into like the Olympics properly?
2004 with Kelly Holmes. So at that point, I was back in the UK. I worked with Kelly for 2 years at that point in her career. And I was also working with Linford's group that had Darren Campbell and Catherine Merry and numerous other sprinters in. So I spent most of that year not being in the UK, but either working with one or other of those groups. So we had a camp in Cyprus, which was a really good camp, and then went into the Olympic Village, which was, we had so little sleep because the timetable was really difficult. There was about an hour's worth of travel each way to the track, which we were doing twice a day. It was just kind of that whirlwind of adrenaline and just kind of, you're almost just doing every day as it comes, and trying to get through it. So obviously we got great results. So with Darren and that men's relay, and then Kelly with her medals.
Yeah, yeah, I definitely want to get back onto that piece. But how did the relationship start with Kelly Holmes? How did you get that?
I met her in Sydney, and then I think, but didn't really do much with her at that point. When I came back from Australia, I spent a year in Ireland at Gerard Hartman's clinic, the residential place that he had at the time. And then when I was thinking of where to go next, my old coach by then had come back to Leeds. So I ended up coming to Leeds. He just started working with the Brownlees when they were young at that point. So he said that, he had athletes that he needed someone to work with. So it was at that point that Kelly was coming up to the English Institute for Sport in Sheffield to see the doctor there. And I ended up starting to work with her at that point, along with, various other sports people. Like Jess Ennis at that point I think she was 18. And so that was how those relationships all started.
So was this was paid work for you then? Like, how much were you doing full time in sport, or sorry, paid in sport?
So I had a part-time job down at the English Institute for Sport, and some of those hours were done in Leeds. And then I had one room in the sports centre at Leeds Beckett or Leeds Carnegie, and then that expanded and expanded and expanded. So I said I'd never come to think about having a business. It just seemed to get busier, and then I took on some new grads, and I took on some experienced physios, and so we took on a new grad every year for about 6 years, because there were sports teams that needed people looking after. There weren't many jobs in the NHS at that point. So it was a great place to be able to give opportunity to people that were in the same position that I'd been when I was a new graduate. And you can't be away without having backup in a team to work with some of your, the other patients that obviously aren't traveling with you. So it was it was a nice job of a bit of a mix of different sports. So I picked up some triathletes, some divers, squash athletes through the EIS job, and then various other people that self-referred.
Right. So that was you had a private clinic at the university.
Well, at that point, I wouldn't have even said it was a clinic. It was just me working in a room. And then I ended up, thinking I'm getting too busy now, so I need to take on somebody else, and got too busy and took on another person. And one room went to two, and then we then got another bit of a room, and then we outgrew that. By 2012, we completely outgrew that, which is when we just moved up the road to a bigger facility.
Right. So is that where, because like Leeds is known as being that hub for some absolute top athletes that will train from there, is that based around that, basically, that your room there?
Yeah, so that was at the track where they, all of the triathletes were coming and training, and athletes were coming and training. And then we're 11 minutes walk from there, which is still really handy. The university was fantastic. When 2004, when Kelly was coming up for treatment, they managed to provide her accommodation on campus, so she could sneak up, get in the back door of the clinic, have treatment, do her training, and then just go back down to the accommodation that they provided. So it's perfect for that. There's lots of places to run. She was close to the physio that she obviously needed to have an awful lot of.
Yeah. No, I mean, it was amazing. I remember watching those races in 2004, and like, what were the aspirations? Like, how confident were you going into the races?
I was confident, and I think because it was great, because whatever we were doing was working for Kelly, and she'd had a lot of lower limb issues. If you look back at her well-documented career, most of the games that she'd been to, she'd done those. She'd still medaled or just been just off the bronze, despite having vast amount of problems. So the first time I started working with her, she was very much that I just know I'll be broken within a couple of weeks, and that had been the pattern for her. But we managed to find a way to fix that, so she wasn't broken, and then she wasn't broken for longer. And her coach was great and said, we don't want we can't afford to have any injuries in the next couple of years. So as she was injured for less than, as she was non-injured for longer and longer and longer, her confidence grew, her training got better and better. At that point, she then decided she was going to do the 8 and the 15. She did some fantastic sessions when we were in Cyprus, like personal best sessions. in Cyprus, 10 days out from the Olympics, and she was in great shape. She'd never been in such great shape physically, and mentally that confidence was there as well, which I think is really key for any athlete. You need to be able to stand on that line and go, you know what, my body will do this for me, and perform.
And so how much does that play a part in your role? So you're there to do the physical side of things and make sure they're, you know, physically injury free. But how much does that mental support of your confidence, how big a part was that? Like, I don't know, was sports psychology around then, or was that something that you would kind of take on naturally?
There wasn't a lot of sports psychology around. I do think that the medical team, the physios, do take, you know, you're there as the person that, you know, they can come and cry on your shoulder because it's a safe place to cry. They can come in and say, I'm really anxious about this. And you can sit there and say, well, actually, no, you've done all your training. And, you know, so you can come back with objective things. I think having a high level of trust, because they will all know that I will do my absolute best to make sure that they're on the start line. And I won't stop until you're there, or there's a real reason why we have to say no. So I think having that level of trust, and I've had people saying, you know, if you told me to go out and do something, I just know that I'll be able to do it, which I'm probably not that aware that it happens, but I also know that that level of trust, and you know, even for some athletes, I think just knowing that there is a solid person there that's on their side on the day, even if you don't even talk to them, they just know that you're there, and I think it's quite valuable.
Oh, I'm sure it is. So is that trusting in you when you're saying get on the start line? Do you have any talk about, obviously there's the coaches there from the performance side, but what about when you're saying physically you're stronger than ever? Are you giving that positive reaffirmation as well? Or are you purely saying, look, you're injury free, or we know you're going to be able to get round? Like, what scope, what level do you go to in terms of that reassurance?
It will depend on the person. It'll depend on the situation. It'll depend on if it's appropriate, because, you know, it again, I think comes with experience that you don't want to say the wrong thing before a race. And there is a point when your job stops and either work that they've done with the sports psych comes in, or the discussion that they have with their coach. So, you know, it's knowing those boundaries. But I've had athletes who I've worked with that I know full well, you know, one of them would always come and say, can you just check my back, please? And we'd go through this thing before every race. I would check their back and say, you're absolutely fine. And they'd go off, and they knew they were fine. I knew that I wouldn't find much, and if I did, I'd fix it. So, and I think sometimes it's just part of that routine of, can you just check my back, please? Yeah, you're fine. Off you go.
Yeah, no, it's really interesting to think of it, because it's like that is it. You've got your one shot in that race. That is it, isn't it? Like you don't get a second chance in those races.
Yeah. And I've got other athletes as well who I know they don't want to talk about anything to do with athletics themselves. You know, so for those athletes, it's more about the fact that, you know, that actually what they want when they come to see you before a race is to talk about other things. Because you've probably spent hours treating them, you know, about family and all the other things that go on that you know that they will want to chat about, that will take their mind off the race. And that, again, I think at that point, that's your role, is just to take their mind off it, or say, right, you're fine, but after your race, you need to come back here and we'll do a couple of things. And
yeah, I mean, that is just a massive part, isn't it? It's like helping with that psychological preparation side as well. But I would have thought that there's not that much covered within your studies around that. So like, how like should that be addressed, or is that something that you can only learn in the field? Like, what are your thoughts on how those skills could be developed?
I think we did do some psychology, and I've been lucky enough that I've gone to talks done by sports psychologists, and, you know, obviously have worked with them within teams. I think sometimes it's knowing when you need to actually say, you really need to go and speak to somebody else about this, because it's not my scope and I haven't got the experience to be able to, you know, help you. You definitely need more help. So sometimes it is just persuading that you recognize something that they need more help with. I think sometimes it just is giving someone the space to actually talk freely, because the physio room should be somewhere where someone can come in and just offload whatever it is that's worrying them. And I think sometimes that's all I provide, is that safe space for someone to come in and just offload, and then you can kind of work away to find a solution. And there's largely obviously them doing it, but you've just provided a pair of ears.
And how does it work, like with the dynamic then? So with you've got that information, like at what point can you share that with a doctor, with the coach? Like what to what level of confidentiality is it?
It would depend on the situation. If it was something medical that you needed to share with the doctor, you would need to ask the athlete, are you happy for me to share this with the doctor? Are you happy for me to share this with the coach? There are certain things that that actually they just need to get it off their chest. So that might be something else that's stressing them entirely. So with that, they've got it off their chest. I've listened, and I just forget about it at that point, unless there's a need to remember it. But sometimes, we all have stresses and we all need to get something off our chest at some point. So, we've all got those kind of people that we can go to, that you should be able to just have a moment and move on.
Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah. No, absolutely. So from that side then, so when she's won those, the first, was it the 800 first?
Yeah.
So like, what is that experience like for you and just the whole team?
To start off, obviously it was a complete buzz, and I did actually happen to be in the stadium on that day. I still can't watch that race without feeling a bit ill, because she kind of leaves it to the last moment and then kind of comes through on the outside and literally wins by a very small margin. The issue we had with that was she obviously won that gold medal. It was really, really exciting, but unfortunately for Kelly, she decided to do the 1500 the very next morning. So we had lots of nutritional kind of areas where Kelly could get something as she was coming through from the mix zone and back into warm up. Obviously did all her post-race massage and everything else, then went back with her to the Olympic Village, at which point she just went, oh, well, I've got my medal now, got my gold medal. Do I really need to do the 15? So myself and the other management were like, that's what you've chosen to do. So unfortunately that night, 2:00 in the morning, we're in the basement underneath the accommodation. She's standing in an ice bath with her medal around her neck. Everybody else had gone out to celebrate except for us. But we were there to do a job. So, okay, we've got a little celebration. You're getting in the ice bath, and you're back out tomorrow morning to do the 1500 meter heats, which obviously if you just not discussions and okay, you've done it now, go out and celebrate, that wouldn't have happened, and she wouldn't have got 2 gold medals.
So I think was she being serious, do you think, when she said that? Like, what if you'd have said, yeah, actually?
I don't know. I think there was that thing of, this is what I've always wanted, and now my job is done. But as we said, no, that wasn't the plan. You changed the plan. So the plan was that you were also going to do this. So I think part of our role in that was just making sure that we executed the plan. There was no reason not to. She wasn't injured. So yeah, we just went through with executing the plan, and obviously all went to plan.
Good job you did. Yeah, that was good. So, and then I can't remember, like, was she favourite for the 1500 as well, or what was the prediction?
She was by then definitely the favourite. And I think at that point, again, that kind of the winning of a race obviously then puts you differently as to how your competitors see you. And so yeah, it was almost won before she went out there, I think, with people kind of going, okay, we've seen what she's got to bring now. And yeah, so we had probably better celebrations once she finished the 15.
Well, it didn't sound like much on the first one, so I'd hope so.
Get in that ice bath with your medal around your neck.
Yeah, God, that must be, that is such a unique experience and a bizarre one, isn't it? Because you're like, amazing, right? Like you hear people say, yeah, we're not switching off, but it's literally there's no switch off at all. You haven't got weeks, days, hours even to take any chance of really enjoying it.
And the Olympic Village is really weird, because once you get back there, everyone else has gone to bed. So it's not like you're even seeing anyone who says, oh, well done. you're literally going back. You get out of your ice bath and you go into your flat, which is quiet because everyone else is sleeping. So it's a really odd place to be.
Yeah, no, I can imagine. I can imagine. And then, so what was like there's absolutely loads of stuff we can go through on here, but how long did you work with her for? Like, how long did she carry on after that?
1 year.
Was
So
that
I
to the
think
world champs or?
no, she did the last race that she did was in Sheffield. It was just um it was I can't remember the type of race it was. It was quite a high level race with, you know, internationals there, but that was the last race she did. And I think, you know, she had spent literally 2 years making sure everything was exactly right to get to those games. And, you know, I think her feet were finished. So without all the she would have had another full year, she probably would have needed to have the same amount of physio input. And obviously there were lots of spin-offs and lots of things that she could do off the back of, and commercial things that she could do off the back of, you know, winning those medals. And quite rightly she did them. And you know, she got the
Yeah.
best result for herself.
Yeah, no, it's brilliant. Yeah, I don't want to skirt over the other things, but there's a lot of other stuff to go to. Darren Camp, do they get the silver?
Gold.
Gold.
Yeah.
God, yeah. Yeah. And that was in the 4x100.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it is amazing. Who else was in that team then? I remember, was that, yeah, who was around then? You don't work with the whole team, you just work with Darren Campbell in that quartet?
I was only working with Darren Campbell's group. So Linford was coaching them at the time, and Ron Rodden was kind of supporting that group as well, who he'd been Linford's coach. So I was kind of working with the athletes within that group, not the 4x4.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, no, it's amazing because again, the success, from what I remember, again, success that we've had in the more recent ones was like it was really wasn't the case back then. So those victories were really massive.
Yeah. No, it was great.
Yeah.
And again, the relays are a stressful thing, isn't it? Because all of you need to be right. All the handovers need to be right. Everything needs to be right on the day. And we were just lucky that day that everything went right.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I love the relay. It's always, it is stressful. Again, even for me, I get stressed watching all of these ones, let alone I've
I
got
don't
no
enjoy
best
watching
view.
it at all.
So and then like you mentioned Jess Ennis, so you've been working with her for quite a long time. So have you been working with her for pretty much her entire career?
From 18, yeah, until she finished.
And when someone like that comes through, like, do you know, or do the coaching team know, right, this person's really got a massive chance to be ultra successful?
So you've got an idea that they have got a chance to be successful, but you've still got to go through those stages of, you know, as you get better and better, probably coming through the ranks and doing better at each, you know, big championship. And I think because anything can happen, you could get injured on the way through. Anything can happen. Mentally, you've got to compete at that level. You have to have the right mentality as well. So I've seen athletes that have been incredibly talented, but don't have the mental strength or skill to be able to compete at that high level, which is quite frustrating to see because they'll do a lot of things right, but just maybe don't access, when you're talking about sports psych, maybe they're the people that need more of that kind of help. But Jess obviously had incredible physical and athletic talent, but also had a really strong mentality. But anything can happen going through. You just don't know.
Yeah. But how do you, like, what are those things that set those people apart and have, like, the kind of the ones like Jess Ennis, Kelly Holmes, Keely Hodgkinson, like, can you tell that they've got those mental attributes as well as the physical sides? Or is that something that gets developed, or is it tend to be innate?
Jess hers seems to have been very innate. Keely Hodgkinson again. So she's because she's only 22. So she out of like Jess was, I started working with her when she was 18. I started working with Keely when she was about 18. So with Jess, she had to work through those levels until she got to 2012. And then she was coming up. She won at the World Champs in Berlin, Whereas Keely's just literally almost catapulted into that level at that really, really young age. Keely, I think, is unbelievably strong mentally. I can see certain aspects of that Kelly Holmes had at that end part of her career, that she just knows herself really well. She knows how she performs really well. She's incredibly smart when it comes to competition, which is really unusual, I think, at that age of 22. And Jess has just got that ability to, because it's 7 events, she was just able to just focus on doing everything really well, and just be strong and believe in herself and believe in the team around her, and that that we'd all got her right. And yeah, really strong. And I think that kind of mental strength is one of the things that sets the top athletes aside from others.
And then how is it managing someone that's got to do 7 events? Because there's a lot of different things going on.
I quite like them because I think there's lots of different things going on, that you need to use your body in different ways for each of those events. So you've got to take that into account. You've got to monitor load, because they're having to do all of those events. So it's making sure they're not getting overtrained or injured with overuse injuries because they're doing too much of one thing. But that's when you need a great coach who's pulling all those parts together and making sure that everything is in the right place, and maybe getting in a different coach for one of the events because that's not, something that they really specialize in. So it's working with a good team, and you might end up having to spend more time on a bike because you've got injuries. So making sure that you've got a good physiologist who can prescribe and help with the right training sessions to get what you're trying to achieve on the track, but you're having to do it on a bike at this point. And so it's just bringing all those parts together.
So how do you manage that then? Because there's a load of other things that can be going on from upper limb, more so than, say, running side. So do you have to have more support from different physios or different medical teams that have got specialisms?
That's why I do private practice with people that are non-athletes. So I've throughout my career kept on top of treating upper limb and lower limb and making sure that I can do both, which I really like, because there will be times where you're getting a lower limb injury because of something from the upper limb and an issue. So I would by and large so with someone like Jess and any of the other heptathletes I work with, I'm quite happy to treat all of those areas, and I like seeing the connections. So whether your lower limb injury is because of something through your rib cage, or whether that's something that's causing something further up in the upper limb, obviously you would ask for further input if needed. Soft tissue is obviously heavily involved with those people as well, because they might not need physio. So I'll tend to see most of my elite athletes once a week for a check or an MOT, and just to make sure things are going in the right direction. Most of them will see soft tissue as well, which is a really big key part of it. And that balance might change if someone's got an injury, but just making sure that everything's being addressed.
Yeah, and so what was it like then? And were you in the stadium in 2012?
Yeah, that was great, because I was only there with Jess, so I actually got to see everything. It was brilliant.
Because that was the night, wasn't it? Was that Super Saturday?
Super Saturday.
On that one? Yeah, I mean that whole weekend. I think Andy Murray won the tennis on the Sunday. So that was like absolutely unbelievable. So Greg Rutherford, did he win first, and then Jess Ennis, and then Mo Farah, was it?
I think it was that order, yeah.
Yeah. So what was it like then?
The stadium was incredible. We kind of knew that Jess had probably won, but again, as she would say, you haven't won until you've won, because anything can happen. So you still don't know. And maybe that's being a bit sort of negative, but you have to wait for that person to get over the line. So when we went back in, you kind of knew that she'd won unless something terrible happened. But I think it's the relief as well. It's the relief of someone actually getting their dreams. And when Keely won this summer, is that relief that they've been able to execute what they wanted to do, because sport's one of those things. It's not just down to you. It's down to, there are other people in the race, and you can't control what they do. So you've got to do the very best that you can and hope that outdoes everybody else. And so there's there's relief, and it's that the 4 years of work that's gone into that, plus all of the other years before that. It's the end of a massive job.
Yeah, I know. That's why the pressure. Like again, for Keely Hodgkinson's race, I was nervous before it. And again, I didn't know much about it before that. And you just think, my God, going through that. But as you were saying before, she seems ultra confident when you see her. She seems completely, really just strong character and knows who she is. But yeah, it's really, really inspiring watching it all. Um, so yeah, so for Jess Ennis then, so you thought she was going to win it beforehand. But like in terms of managing injuries, is it more challenging, I guess, doing that for when you've got heptathlon? Because again, like, do they tend to have more injuries throughout their career?
They tend to have more niggles. So if I'm treating a decathlete, you know full well when they come in for an hour session, they'll probably have at least 6 or 7 things wrong with them. Not big things, but it could be a bit of a shoulder niggle and a bit of this and a bit of that and a bit of the other. And I think heptathletes, I would keep an eye on any of the heptathletes I work with. I'll make sure I check their back, I'll check their feet, I'll check their, shoulder range and upper body range. So there will be all those things that you'll need to check and be really thorough in the checking. Whereas with a runner, you wouldn't need to always check their shoulders. And whereas I think just making sure their body works as well as it can for all the 7 events, that to me is the key of making sure that they're not going to fall apart.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and then so which other athletes? I don't want to dwell on those guys, but like who else have you worked with that you think have been like real impressive achievements, even if it maybe didn't result in a gold medal?
The Brownlees are obviously, I've worked with them since they were 15 and 13, because my old coach worked with them. So again, 2 phenomenal athletes. The fact that they had each other, because it's quite hard when you're at that level to find someone else who can actually match you in training. Both, incredibly good competitors. So they've been fantastic. James Wilstrock is another one who's a squash player. Has just had some amazing results, and he just loves playing squash. He's now nearly 40 and he's still out there playing squash, and he's now doing some coaching, but he's really committed to making sure he stayed injury free, which is why he's still playing squash at this age. But yeah, and I think just mentally strong enough to just keep going through that because he just loves what he's doing and making sure that he stays in one piece.
Yeah, yeah. And the Brownlees, I mean, that's an epic story as well in terms of that. And they just seem such nice, down to earth people. And again, very relatable.
Yeah. And they love training. They love Yorkshire. They love training. They love going out on their bikes and love running, and absolutely lovely people, as you say.
Do you think for those people then, do you think that for those guys, do you think they'd have been as successful as they were if they didn't have had each other?
Everybody needs great training partners. I don't think it's something you can do on your own. I think they've driven each other to do what they've done because they've always had someone. I think that maybe that brotherly competitiveness as well is in there. And I think being brothers, you can probably just say, you can be completely natural with each other, can't you? But I think for women are much luckier because they can actually find a, man of a good club level. It's easier for you to find a training partner. Whereas I think when you're the top man in the world, to have a training partner that's going to meet you, they've got to be pretty similar kind of level. So for them, they've had each other. Even Christmas morning, they'll be able to go out and train with each other. And
yeah, no, it is. It's a funny thing, isn't it? At that level is like you do need that person that's constantly pushing you on. And then yeah, in terms of Paris, then you were saying how amazing it was. Like, how did it feel starting at the end where you're like you were in that selfie, like they were saying, oh yeah, and they got that photo. So how did you feel in that moment when you actually were mentioned on on the BBC?
I think like you, I felt really nervous, and I hadn't intended to go down with Trevor because that's likely to be where the cameras are coming. I went, no, come on. And then when we were watching her, and she probably hadn't been as quick in that first lap as we maybe thought she might have been. And you're looking at that, and everybody in that race is really fast. So yeah, watching her finish, knowing what it meant to her, I burst into tears. I think Trevor did the same. And it's almost that sense of disbelief that it's what you've wanted has actually happened. And then it does take a little bit of time to sink in. And then she obviously came round, and there's all the joy, and there's the emotion. And again, I think because we've all been so focused to getting to that point, and you don't take your eye off the ball because you've still got to get to that point. I think your first reaction is just, oh, we've done it.
Yeah, I mean that was epic. That was like maybe the standout moment of like the Olympics, well, from a British person's perspective. So again, she was the favourite going into the competition, but she just looked so dominant from what we could see. So were you guys confident the whole way through on that?
Definitely, we were really confident. But you'll have seen with some people didn't get through to finals, and then Josh Kerr's race when he would have been one of the favourites in that, and somebody else just happened to have a really good day on the day. So you've got to go in with that confidence that you'll be able to do this. But I think if you make the assumption that you've already won it before you've won it, then there is that chance that it may not go if you just take your eye off the ball. So, but I think she probably had a couple more seconds in the bag that if should she have needed them, she would have been able to run that little bit quicker. And you don't know what other people are going to do, and everyone brings their A game to the Olympics, don't they?
Yeah, well, no, like you say, that Josh Kerr one and Ingebrigtsen, that was mental, that wasn't it? Because no one was really thinking of who's the American guy that won it. Like yeah, it's like, well, no one was talking about him, and then it was like, wow. Yeah, but that's what makes it amazing, doesn't it? Really, it's like that really was spectacular. And like, when does, like, everyone talks about Ingebrigtsen being quite arrogant or whatever it is, but like, when do you see there being like, where does that boundary go? I'm not saying he is or he isn't, but like from like arrogance to supreme confidence, because you really, I would assume you need to be absolutely real conviction in yourself to be able to get to anywhere near that level.
It's that kind of hard thing, isn't it? Because the people I've worked with, I've been lucky that, like anybody that you're treating, you see them on a good day, you see them on a bad day, and you just see them, and that's who they are. They don't need to put on any show. So I think sometimes the athletes that you see out there, and I don't know Ingebrigtsen, sometimes that's their persona for when they're out in competition, because maybe that's what makes them feel confident on the line. I can honestly say that the ones I've worked with, they've all been really genuine people that when they're out there competing, that there is a genuine person out there. And I think a lot of that confidence is in here, and they can then perform to their best because they just know they've done all the work.
Yeah. Yeah, well, Noah Lyles as well. Like, I actually loved his vibe. Like, he's absolutely out there. But that's what makes it, box office and entertaining is that everyone's talking about it, aren't they? Because that does, rightly or wrongly, have a big impact. And obviously, he won anyway. So it was, it was really good. So I asked James Brown, who's, I know, a colleague of yours, if he had any questions for you. And he's got this one. So if you don't mind having a think about this one. So in situations where an athlete you're working with is later diagnosed with a condition that wasn't initially apparent, how do you navigate the impact that this has on the therapeutic relationship? How do you manage adjustments in the treatment plans, and what steps do you take to maintain trust and communication with the athlete through these changes?
That's a really big question. I think with all of my patients and all my athletes, I'd like to think that we already have a really high level of trust, and that I'll be doing my absolute best for them. I think if things change and show up that you weren't expecting, I think they would understand that I've been really, really thorough, and this wasn't something that had missed, but I think it's something that was, that we weren't expecting. And at that point, if you've got a high level of trust, and then you can say, okay, we weren't expecting this, we now need a new plan, we might need to bring in experts or extra treatment from somewhere else, or go and see a doctor that you're working with, But I think if you've got a high level of trust, you hopefully will then move on and create a new plan and create new, whether it's goals or time frames that you're having to work within, that will enable you to still get back to the best result that you're wanting.
Have you had any experiences where you've had that happen?
I think my worst one was 2008 with Jess, and she had a funny foot niggle that hadn't really shown up anything particularly on a scan, and it ended up being a fracture in the navicular. But she could train really well one day, and it just didn't appear to be, anything in particular. So I wasn't at the race where it actually fractured through, and we had to make that decision. Did she go to the Olympics in 2008 and risk that being a career-threatening injury? Did we pin and plate it? Did we rest it and miss that Olympics altogether, which was obviously a massive team decision. And we were all, literally as a team, we were all absolutely devastated because we were so invested in getting Jess to those Olympics. Every single one of us offered to hand in our notice to the team because we felt, we all looked at ourselves and like, what have I missed? Has it been my fault? And we had such a strong team that Jess herself turned around and said, well, no, don't be ridiculous. It's nobody's fault. This is just what we've done. And now we actually have to, I trust you all. We're all staying together, and we have to move on now as a team to work out how we're going to get back from this in the best possible way, and then get me back to competing. And she won the world champs the year after, off the back of having a foot in a boot during those 2008 Olympics. So, but I think that speaks volumes about the amount of trust that we all had in each other, but the fact that we were also all prepared to step back and step away from someone who potentially could go on and win an Olympic medal for the sake of that person. And there was no finger pointing. There was nothing.
How do you think, this is a big question as well, how do you think you get that trust? Like, how do you develop it where you get to that point where there's just completely no question?
Communication. I think communication's everything. And I think it's trying to tread that fine line between you do become friendly with somebody, but you've also got to be the person that's able to go, you know what, right now I'm your physio. I need you to, we need to stop now because this could potentially become worse. And I need to speak to various people in the team. We need to work out what's going on. But that level of communication, I think, is absolutely vital. And I think the best times when it's worked well is when you've got an athlete who completely trusts what you're doing and they're not going out and searching for other answers elsewhere, because they know that if you don't know the answer, you will know somebody who will. So it's still within that same team. You've got coaches that you can ring and say, we need to back off at the moment. And they don't question the fact you've got to back off. They want to know the reason why you want to back off, how they can then also make sure this isn't going to happen again, or what was the reason that caused it. So those for me are those really good teams. And whether it's a nutrition thing or a psychology thing or an S&C thing, coaching thing, the athlete is the person in the middle that's the important person. And if we don't get that person right, then nothing, it's just not worth doing. And none of us can do that on our own.
Yeah, no, I think, very, very well articulated, taking ego out of it and just being clear and communicative with it.
I think that support that the professionals will get from each other as well. So the coach could ring you and say, do you mind just checking something because I've noticed this, and could you just have a quick word, or just make sure you include it in your examination. But we all need to be able to pick up the phone and ask for help, and that for me makes a big difference to how I work and how it affects the athletes.
Yeah, having that culture with the team where you're happy to hold your hands up and say, I'm unsure, or I don't know, or whatever it is. I think it doesn't always happen. Like, you think that actually now that makes sense, but yeah, I'm sure it doesn't happen in a lot of environments. So yeah, it's great to hear that you've got that. And how does that, do you think, how pulling that team together then? How do you think that happens where you do create that culture?
I think you either gravitate towards certain people, or so with Keely's team, you obviously got Trevor and Jenny, the coaches, and I seem to, I think partly got pulled into there because Keely had initially been coming over to Leeds a lot more. But I think because, again, we've got that trust that's there and it works, and, you know, we can make it work if she's away doing altitude training. I think you start to learn the people that are really great at their jobs, but also have got something that gels well with the rest of the team. And I think just building that team is with the right people is crucial, because you're spending a lot of time working with these people, and you will have bad days and good days and a lot of time traveling, and it's got to be right.
And like, yeah, keep thinking of more questions here as well. So sorry for that. But like, in terms of like from a fear or imposter syndrome perspective, like, is that something that you've experienced or you've had to help a colleague or an athlete with?
I think we've probably all experienced it at some time. I think running my business, like I said, I never planned to run a clinic, and I wouldn't ever have said I was a businesswoman. We don't get taught anything about business, and suddenly you're running this thing. And I remember my dad saying, because I said, "Oh, I'm not really a businesswoman." He went, "You're a woman, you run a business, therefore you are a businesswoman." And I think then that actually gave me a lot of courage to be able to say, actually, some of the decisions I need to make, they have to be fair, but I've also got to make them as a business decision rather than totally with your heart and just say yes to everything. I think when I first went to that Sydney Olympics, there was a lot of me that was a bit shell shocked that I was even there and working with some of the people that I was working with. In athletics, they're all people, to me, they're all the same. They're not, I wouldn't put an athlete on a pedestal, because they are still normal people that have normal ups and downs. And I think with physio, we're really lucky that we've got a job where your results support what you've done. So if you've done the right thing, the person gets off the table and says, "Oh, I feel so much better, thank you for that." Or you can see improvement, or you can measure improvement. So I think it is one of those jobs I get a lot of confidence out of treating and then seeing the results.
Yeah. No, I think it is. It's sometimes, I think, from on the outside, you think, "Oh, wow, what's it like working with Jess Ennis or Keely Hodgkinson?" Whereas for you, you're day in, day out. You certainly can't afford to have any mindset like that, and I'm sure it'd drive them up the wall as well. You obviously can't have that sort of thing.
And they're normal people. They are
Yeah.
normal people.
Yeah, and even though I've been doing this for a long time, I still think, "Oh, wow, that's cool." When I go into a football team or something, it's like, "Wow, there's X, Y, or Z." So yeah, it's not good, but that, I think, that's maybe stems with some of the problems why people do have expectations, because there's so much pressure and attention and focus on these people. And like, what's in terms of Keely Hodgkinson? How long do you think? What are her plans? How long is she going to be at the top for?
I don't know. That's not been something I've asked. She's only 22. I think with any athlete, you go on as long as you're enjoying it and you're healthy, and it's something that you want to do. It's a real commitment to do if you actually aren't enjoying it anymore. Don't know. Who knows?
Yeah, well, hopefully for a long time, because it's really, it's amazing and inspirational what she's done.
Oh,
And
she's
then
amazing.
yeah, no, it just comes across as just a really confident and like good ambassador for Britain in general, for getting just sport. And like from your side, what is your advice for people that are looking to get into the industry, whether it be a physio, doctor, sports therapist, anything?
I probably can't answer that question for the doctor, but I think the same would apply to everything. I think keeping an open mind is probably the biggest thing. Always think about the box. I think with a lot of the injuries that I've actually managed to fix that have seemingly been something straightforward, but have been complicated. So I think just thinking about outside the box. I've done a vast number of courses since I qualified. So what usually drives me going on another course is the fact that I've got someone who's come in for treatment, and I know there's something else I need to be able to treat, but I don't actually know how to treat it yet. So I'll usually end up finding a course based on what I might need to treat that's something I don't know. Having, making as many contacts as possible, so you've got people to learn from and ask. And I genuinely think that a lot of what I do is fairly straightforward, but it's really thorough. So I'll assess things thoroughly, so I know what I'm treating thoroughly. So I think, and then you can bring in everything you've learned from all your courses or from other people that you've worked with. Sort of, I don't know if I've answered your question there, but
Yeah,
I think just
no, definitely.
being open-minded, and I think also I still don't think I know everything. I still know that there'll be loads to learn, and I still know there'll be somebody that will walk through the door who will have something that I've never seen before. And again, I'm going to have to keep thinking outside the box to try and find some way to fix that. And I love that challenge.
Yeah, no, well, I'm sure that's why you maintain to be wanting to people want to work with you for so long, because I think as soon as you do think you know everything, then that's probably not a good place to be. But no, brilliant. Look, I really appreciate that. I know we've gone on slightly longer than I said, but I just find it so fascinating, and I'm sure I've missed loads out. Actually, no, one more question, actually, in terms of doing a business then, because I think this is something that we come across a lot where people have just got a clinic and it's like, all right, well, this has just happened. How's it happened? Like, what would your advice be for people starting their own physio business?
Having the right people around you. So I've got a mixture of experienced physios that I can go and ask for help. I've got some that I'm mentoring that have just got better and better as they've again been able to ask for help and have gone on different courses and have got different experience. And then I'll take on quite often some new graduates or physios that are early on in their career, because I think it's important to give that opportunity back. I think it's just really important to work with people that you enjoy working with, and it helps you to. For me, when I was younger, my boss was very good at had a job that enabled me to fit in around my athletics and being able to go on training camps. So I'd rather have the right physios in our place, even if at times they are going off to do athletics trips, or one works with rugby. So I like the fact they've got somewhere to come back to that's their kind of home clinic, but then they can also go and fulfill their dreams elsewhere and bring some of those skills back to the clinic. But business
Yeah.
isn't easy, and I think for me it's more about the patients getting the right experience, the physios having a great experience and wanting to stay, us all being comfortable with each other and able to ask questions, and hopefully we do all the right things in that area.
Yeah. No, I'm sure you do create that culture and an environment. Look, Ali, really appreciate your time. Really enjoyed it. It's fascinating for me to hear about this because it's my whole adult life. I can remember each of those evenings that we've talked about there. So thank you for being a part of it, and I appreciate you sharing it with me.
You're very welcome. Thanks for having us on.
Thanks, Ali. Cheers.
Cheers. Thank you.